What's up, guys?
Hey,
Hey,
Joe.
Joe.
Good. Good to see you guys again. Yeah, last time we spoke was a bit ago, and I think a few things have changed. But I guess what have you all been up to since we last were on a podcast together?
Yeah, I think a few things have happened in my life. I've had a baby. That was a big one. I didn't have the
Awesome.
baby, but my wife had a baby. And then,
Congrats.
and aside from that, having basically two babies with the startup and the actual baby.
It's a lot of
Yep.
work.
Yeah.
How about you,
What about
Johnny?
you, Johnny?
Um, r- yeah, really just kind of building. Sorry, unprepared for this question.
Oh no, it happens, man.
Yeah.
Johnny's life is crazy though. He's got like three kids and also does a startup and he's constantly I don't know if he has a free moment to himself like once a month.
I'll say the one rose. Yeah, we do like rosebud thorn. I don't know if you've heard of that, but
No,
my
what's
rose
that?
lately has been over the last since we spoke, being able to get more consistent gym time. That's been good.
That's awesome. That's awesome. What kind of workouts are you doing?
There's a CrossFit gym in my town that's pretty nice. I'm
Dope.
regular there.
You do CrossFit? That's awesome. I do. I do that too.
Yeah,
Oh,
no,
you
it's
do?
I do.
it's a weird cult and also really fun.
It is a weird cult.
It's
It's a
always
cult.
scared me.
Really? Why?
Yeah, it just feels like I don't know, like lifting a tire or something. It feels like a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. I mean, it's funny because I used to do construction work, and I'm like, this is basically the same thing, but we're just paying money to do it now. So,
Yeah.
carry things for a long ways and lift weights, but it's a good time. What's your favorite workout, Johnny? Do you have one?
I usually like things with gymnastic components to them. So, getting inverted and going like upside down on the wall, or like doing a really nice set of pull-ups is like kipped pull-ups is satisfying.
It's cool.
I think it's just fun to pick up heavy stuff and put it down again over and over. So,
It's really fun, dude. That's my favorite thing. Yeah.
Wow, you guys are really selling this. I'm gonna have to start thinking about
I think you would really like CrossFit, Dave. I think you do. You have the personality type for it.
it. Yeah,
Like
I believe you on
kind
that.
of type A, kind of yeah, I think you would like it. So, yeah.
there's something
Uh,
about a group setting and having other people doing it around you that makes me like way more competitive than I could ever be, doing it solo.
Johnny, you are super competitive as a person. I'll be honest. We have had company offsites. We've had like I don't know how many of them, but I don't think Johnny's ever lost an activity at a company offsite.
Yeah, well, I take axe throwing very seriously. I take aardvark racing very seriously, or armadillo racing very
Armadillo.
seriously. Yeah,
Oh, that's
But even
hilarious.
shotguns, like you were good at that too.
it's about
Hey,
consistent practice. That's why I have three armadillos.
what, you have three
There you
armadillos?
go.
No.
Okay, I was like, that'd be insane.
What you call
Uh,
your kids, I
th
guess.
three shotguns?
Zero shotguns.
Zero shotguns. Okay. Well, that's too bad. Anyway, that's cool. Well, maybe I'll do a CrossFit workout sometime. That'd be a lot of fun. Yeah, my coach, she actually used to be in the games a lot. So I get but we trade coaching for data mentoring. So that's the trade we do because she's a data engineer now. So that's pretty
Wow.
awesome. Yeah, yeah. So
That's a pretty good trade. So you
it's a
get
good
free
trade.
CrossFit is what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah, she does all my programming for me. It's awesome. So it's super cool. Well, awesome. Yeah, for the audience, thanks for uh going off on a CrossFit podcast, which would be pretty dope actually. I could talk about fitness and lifting for hours if you want. But yeah, so how's things been over at Estuary?
It's been good. Yeah, what's the big headline for us? So we've been one of the biggest changes we've done is we've been really focused on like secure deployments,
Mm,
specifically private deployments. So deploying our whole service for customers so that they can have it running in their own VPC and their own region, all that stuff, and any cloud. So that's been really fun. Um, Definitely like a lot. It's a big thing to start doing, but yeah, other than that, it's been pretty much business as usual for
yeah,
us.
that's cool. What's the
Yeah.
oh, sorry, go ahead, Johnny.
Yeah, it was just like a lot of sort of incremental improvements and new connectors and that kind of thing. But as Dave was saying, that capability to kind of spin up data planes, like these deployments all over the place, including like private deployments, has been a pretty substantial lift. So it's been really nice to get that out the door.
What's been driving the interest in private deployments?
A lot of it, I guess it's a combination of multiple things. Like one is being able to be co-located for like a data egress perspective. You avoid all the data egress costs if you're in the same cloud and region as the client. Two is I think there's a trend, especially for the much bigger enterprises, to not want to use just like a standard public SaaS to make sure that you're connected on very, very secure channels and not intermingling data and doing all that stuff. So
Mm,
we're seeing that a lot. We're seeing a lot of interest in it.
that's interesting. Is that
Yep.
becoming more of a kind of a point of special or differentiation between you and other companies in your vertical?
Yeah, definitely. I think it is. There's of course companies that offer stuff like that. Like
Yeah.
you can deploy Kafka like that as all as you want and stuff. So
Hmm.
um, there's definitely alternatives, but it's doing it in a fully managed SaaS is kind of a differentiating thing.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
Since you guys started the company, like what's been some of the big changes you've seen in your vertical?
That's a good question. One is a little bit more emphasis on real time. We are a real time company, and we've kind of when we first started it, we de-emphasized real time so that we could do everything, right? We should work with batch data because for analytics, people don't really care about real time. For other use cases, they might, but starting to be a little bit more forefront. Another one is I think this whole iceberg thing has had a major it's just been a major topic on of conversation within companies as well. So that's something we're seeing a lot more. Um, and and I think at some level, I think one other thing that I've seen is that this is going to be a little more controversial. Like open source connectors don't really make much sense.
Spicy take. Uh,
Yeah,
why is that?
that's some. Okay, so what we've observed is that if you have a whole bunch of engineers that are individually writing connectors to different specifications that are in their head, they tend to do them differently, right? Like everyone's just writing a different type of connector. So they solve their own use case with that. And then they kind of walk away and forget about it. And they contribute it to the community. And so that connector is going to just be working for their use case. But data doesn't come in one shape and size, right? Data comes in like a million shapes and sizes.
Mhm.
So these things need to be maintained if they're useful at all. And that's kind of the issue with the open source side of things. If you're for connectors, you have to go in and figure out if you have an issue with that, what this person did with all their design choices to actually be able to fix it and
Mm.
change it.
Yeah, I'd say we've kind of known this for a little while, but when we were starting out, we and I'm sure a lot of other companies were hoping to get some value from the open source ecosystem. And we like all of our connectors are either pure open source or source available ourselves. So it's not like a knock on like making connector code available. It should be available, but it's really just more about the expectations of like who's actually going to do the work on a connector. And oftentimes, like for connectors in the open source ecosystem, someone has done a first pass basically, and they've done that pass to make it work for their use case, and that's great. More power to them. But we've just found again and again and again that there's such a wide gulf between here's a connector that works for some person's use case and here's a connector that works reliably for most anybody's use case. And
Mm.
there's an enormous distinction between those two things, and it requires just a lot of care and feeding and effort to make it really polished in the way it needs to be. So strategically, it's just we have a philosophy of like if we're doing a connector, we're doing the connector. It's either don't do it at all or do it really well, and there's
Hmm.
not a lot of middle ground between those two.
Yeah, that seems to be one of the knocks against one of the more popular open source connector uh, projects out there is sometimes things work and then sometimes things catastrophically break and you can't really figure out why. Of course, you can go to the Slack channel or um, do a pull request if you want to fix it yourself. But yeah, that has
Yeah.
happened. I've had clients where it's happened like seemingly standard stuff too, like breaking on just MySQL CDC, something that should be pretty straightforward. That's not esoteric database, right?
Totally. Yeah. Actually, Bob Moore from Stitch Data, he's an investor in our company. And one of the earliest things he said to me was exactly this. He was like, we built Stitch Data. We realized that open source connectors don't really make sense. And then
Interesting.
that's one of the reasons that we sold the company when we did, because it was just, unmaintainable, basically.
Okay, that's an interesting comment from somebody who's been there, done that. Like Stitch is still
Exactly. Yeah.
widely popular, for better or for worse. I would say it's still popular, but yeah. But I think it did have a kind of a reputation of being good, but when it worked. So
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. No, it's great when it works, but it's maybe not going to work in every single case. And I think that's just like the philosophy of saying like you have to take it and own it, and you need to know who you're going to go to when something breaks. And if that's not the case, it's not going to probably be solving your
mm.
problem.
So how much of that work then is so you're a connector company among a few other things, but so how does that work then? Like how do you choose what to prioritize and staff as a company like that where you know do you go heavy on just making sure the engineering's solid, customer response, like maybe walk me through that.
We probably
Yeah.
have different answers for this.
Okay.
Johnny, you can go first.
Yeah, I mean, much of it is customer demand, of course. And philosophically, I'd say we have a philosophy of fix bugs first. Like if there are open issues with existing current connectors that we're supporting, those get priority over brand new connector development. There's a bit of a meta game of also like how do we build connectors? Can we improve the process of building connectors in general and make it, make it more efficient for us to do that, more easier for us to operate and maintain? Can we organize these things so that we can get improvements out kind of in mass, where instead of just improving one connector, we're able to make a change that's improving the behavior of lots of connectors at once? And this is also like this is a place where it really kind of shows this is a distinction I'll draw with like more open source connector development, where in that case, in the open source ecosystem, every connector is its own special snowflake. And it's very hard to sort of get, get improvements that are more across the board. I'll say
Mm,
amortized improvements by like improving something so that I get improvement across a lot of different connectors. So a lot of our focus has been on just sort of trying to be really diligent about improving common libraries and common approaches to things that we see across connectors. So we've done a lot of work on CDC and SQL capture to make that work really well. We're starting to do a lot more work in terms of capturing from SaaS APIs, and we've been on our own journey where like we kind of throw around SaaS, like a SaaS connector as a term, but it's an enormously large umbrella, and you have SaaS systems that are really databases, sometimes more complicated than databases at one
mhm.
end, and then other SaaS that's a lot lighter weight. It's basically just a really simple REST query. There's a very wide distinction, so you kind of need to carve that up a little bit and think about like we call it more like head SaaS and tail SaaS, of like these
Oh,
SaaS
interesting.
integrations that really, like if you're doing them, you need to approach them with the same diligence as you would for like a complex technology connector.
Like
Um,
NetSuite is a good example of
yeah.
something that's just super complex, right? If you're going with like the full integration. But
Yeah.
then there's several APIs that you can implement in 20 minutes.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
For complex stuff like NetSuite, maybe walking through how this works, then like if you were to um, build a connector from scratch today for a complex system like NetSuite, well, how would you approach that? I mean, you don't have to give me the details of how you do it, but like, what's the mental framework for approaching something that complex?
Yeah, that one, knowing what I know now, I might make a stronger argument for not doing it.
Oh, okay. Well,
But
that's a good answer too.
that's
Just
water under the bridge, and we put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into that one. NetSuite is a bit of a it's an interesting animal because it's an Oracle database under the hood, sort of, but it also lies to you a lot. So
Oh,
it presents the veneer of like, oh, this is a more of like a SQL system. I can use info schema to figure out like what tables exist and what their columns and types are and that kind of thing. The issue is that it will just tell you things that are wrong all the time.
oh,
And there are, yeah, I know it's a little nuts. Um,
it's not an LLM. That was a joke. Crazy.
um, and also, there are just all kinds of undocumented like performance quirks. When you get into needing to do captures of like much larger NetSuite deployments, there's a lot of performance work that you need to do that is really just completely undocumented. Um, so that one was I'm not sure there's a lot of takeaway from that integration in particular that really
Other than just
translates well.
pain. Like,
Yeah, other than just pain.
Trial and error. Really,
oh
like
my God. What are
a
the
lot
times
of
you
that
just
is
wanted to give up on it? You're just like, this isn't even worth it. How, I guess you're competitive though, right? Did you kind of just stick it through like you're doing a hard CrossFit workout, or what was how did you?
Johnny didn't build that one. He did a little bit of the like underlying stuff for it, but
Oh, okay.
he's not
Smart.
the actual builder.
Okay. He still has
Yeah.
dark hair, so that's good. He's not completely gray yet. Like Dave and I. Um,
Yeah,
Um,
every time we talk, I feel like you and I are both getting more and more gray.
yeah, I'm only 20 too. It's crazy. So I'm just kidding.
yeah. Um, I'd say one common pattern for a lot of SaaS APIs, just to give one quick example of how you can like approach these with some commonalities between different kinds of APIs, is that a lot of SaaS APIs have like a capability to fetch a recent window of things that have changed, like things that have changed in, the 10,000 most recently changed items, for example. And then another capability to go walk a whole bunch of records from that API as well. So that once you start to realize that like there's okay, so we're going to need to do some incremental polling where we're looking for new stuff, and we're going to need to be able to backfill, and we can make those kind of standardized approaches for how we build connectors to access these APIs, and start to have some common and underlying frameworks and code for doing that. So that's the kind of place where we've gotten efficiencies out of it.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah, the CDK is super important. If you can just anything you learn can go right back into that developer kit, uh,
Hmm.
then the next one is twice as easy.
How important is the developer experience?
Yeah, well,
For
it's
what?
important for us because we live and breathe it all the time.
Yeah.
um, so I'd say it's important, but the current consumers of it is mostly us. We of course want others to be able to write connectors too. Some do that actually, but it's not super common, and we kind of internally embrace that that's our job mostly, is to write connectors. Um, the If we ever hope for people externally to be able to write connectors and have that go well, of course, that needs to be a great experience too.
Hmm. Oh yeah. Yeah, I think developer, especially when we talk about open source projects, like contributors want to feel good about the work they're doing. So um,
Yeah,
Yeah.
we've always talked about, something that I think has happened in other places. So this is not a novel idea anymore, but um, doing something like a marketplace where you can have people contribute and then actually make the money from the connector that they're contributing.
yeah,
I think that would be pretty neat.
Yeah.
But that's not something we haven't really prioritized yet.
Yeah. That's just thinking about how to improve. Sort of, we talked about some of the incentive structures that aren't really there in the open source connector ecosystem, and how we
mm,
could fix the incentive structures a little bit and make it more attractive to, for someone to actually put the effort into like caring and feeding for a connector that's actually being used in real production at scale contexts. And one option is to make incentivize them. They have skin in the game. Like if this connector can be really successful for a lot of people, then they directly like benefit from that.
oh yeah, that
Yeah,
was
give them a
something I
rev
was.
share.
Yeah, that would be great. I know Max Howell. He was on my podcast a while ago. So he's the guy who created Homebrew. Um, and he had some project. It was a TXYZ, I think it was T.XYZ. But it was something where he's trying to remunerate developers for their open source contributions because it's insane. I think I saw like the people who maintain requests, like the Python library. I think it only gets like under $20,000 a year,
Yeah.
which is insane considering that how widely used that is. And
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
crazy.
yeah, it's sad actually.
What's
Um,
the tactic? Like how does he actually
I
try
don't
to make
know.
more?
It was sort of this blockchain thingamajig where you get paid off of like uh, yeah, I don't know. I need to look at the specifics of it because see, because I was like, that's interesting. How does this work? Same kind of question. We were just talking about kind of open source dynamics of just paying open source contributors because he said when he did Homebrew, right? Like that's one of the most widely downloaded pieces of software in the world. It's Homebrew, and he didn't see a
Mhm.
dime. Like he had to go
Wow.
get a job and stuff. Like wasn't making any money off it, right? And then he's the guy who, if you remember, he was the person who made that tweet about getting rejected from Google because he couldn't pass a binary search question or something like that. Even though he's, wrote very popular.
Mhm.
It was an inverted binary tree, I think it was. Like he didn't do that question, but you know, also wrote one of the most popular software packages on the planet. But
Yeah.
um, so it happens.
Crazy. Yeah.
That does happen.
Yeah, but it just seems like the open source. I think it is a good idea for the marketplace, so that is interesting. I would say maybe try it. Because I look at other projects. I'm not going to name names. There's obviously popular open source projects in the data ecosystem, and I'm like, I don't know what the incentive is to contribute to this. I would love to, but like I got other things to do. And say with a lot of other,
Right.
but people do. But I'm just like, is it for just the love of it, or I don't know. So.
Yeah, it feels like a social thing more than like an actual economic thing, and that only goes so far, most likely, right? Like once you have a job to do that's not related to that, you're probably going to focus on your job versus focusing on maintaining someone else's connectors.
Well, yeah, especially when it's when there's maybe a company backing it, right? And then you feel like you're kind of doing a lot of unpaid work for a company. To me, that seems a bit odd, but maybe I'm odd. I don't know. Uh,
Yep.
Yep.
Agreed.
yeah, it's interesting. Iceberg, um, big topic these days. We're recording this coming off the heels of reInvent, where Amazon announced. What did they announce?
S3 tables, right? So S3
Yeah.
tables are a bunch of things. One is that it's a new kind of catalog that's not exactly glue, that's within S3. That's probably the biggest thing, but it's a bunch of other things, basically APIs that allow you to interact directly with an S3 table to be able to do stuff like compaction, um, not upserts, but you can do compaction. And then it's a uniform pricing across the whole thing, right? So the pricing is you can pay them for all managing the compaction for you for queries. Is it for queries actually? And
Yeah.
not queries.
Not queries. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
this is
then
probably a good place to start is just picking apart like what was actually announced because
Yeah, let's
yeah,
we had
pull it up real
some
quick here.
yeah, we had some initial confusion on it, and it's like it's very good branding. It's certainly made a splash. And this is fairly new to all of us, so I think we're kind of picking through it ourselves.
Hmm.
Um, but the biggest pieces, as far as I can tell, are number one, basically a S3 table is a glue catalog. So AWS has implemented a driver for Spark and Flink and others that's up on GitHub now that allows those tools to sort of integrate and not use this catalog, this S3 tables Iceberg catalog. So there's a catalog component. Then this is different from AWS Glue. There seems to be a good integration between Glue and the S3's tables Iceberg catalog, but they're not the same thing. Um, so that's one component. And the other component of it is essentially better optimized S3 infrastructure, I think, like reading between the lines a little bit. They talk about improved performance. I think what they've done or are planning to do, and we can talk about this a little bit more, is basically just really optimize like the underlying S3 infrastructure for the Iceberg use case. Um, but that's at a high level, like that's what has actually changed or what's being introduced by S3 tables in my understanding of it.
Yeah.
Um, so you're still bringing your own compute. Like the tutorial on AWS's site for using S3 tables is using EMR. It's using Spark and EMR. to actually drive table upserts and queries and that kind of thing. There's no compute aside from compactions that are being brought to bear with S3 tables. You're still bringing your own compute in order to actually do table operations. They are doing compactions. I haven't really figured out how it's different from the compactions that AWS Glue already offered.
Mm.
It might just be a rebranding thing. It's a little unclear if it's actually different or not.
It's more expensive. That's
Yeah,
definitely one difference.
yeah. We were noting that it's like 5 cents per gigabyte of
That's
compacted
right.
data, which like if you, so the way compactions work, you've got like a bunch of changes that have happened to a table, and those changes might not be very big. But let's say you've got like a 10 terabyte table and you've maybe got like a terabyte of change data that's been built up and that's being compacted into your table. Now, you might think that that's like a terabyte of compaction that you might need to do, but it really depends on how your data is distributed through the table. Because if it's kind of uniformly, randomly, like different parts of the table that need to be touched, you're potentially needing to write out 10 terabytes of like compacted table data. So that we'll have to see how this works out, but that compaction pricing component surprised me a little bit. Like that
Mm.
looks a little pricey to me. Um, so but it's still that's an interesting piece. But in any case, it's TLDR faster S3 for the Iceberg use case and a built-in catalog, which is very clever. And not
That's
that
pretty
much
cool.
else is changing right now.
Yeah, it sounds like mostly a really good win for AWS, right? If
Hmm.
they can kind of make it easier to do Iceberg, and then you do it on AWS, and uh, AWS gets a huge chunk of this whole game that they didn't get because they didn't really win the data warehouse war, and so they'd be clawing some back from Snowflake, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, when I saw the announcement, it definitely kind of felt like finally, almost
yeah,
is what I think I said to somebody else. Like, because it seemed like it was this was a like an inevitability. Like, I think just from pure game theory, you would have to go this route at some point, for
yeah,
Mhm.
something like that, because your competitors most certainly are adopting this. So but
Yeah.
the trick is, you're making money off your quote competitors anyway,
right.
no matter what. So, heads you win, tails
Yeah, tails
I
I
win.
lose.
It's yeah, it's because icebergs, it is taking over the world right now. I'm curious to see like how. I mean, the thing I always come back to is Databricks spent $2 billion on Tabular, and I don't think they just did that because they felt like being charitable to the ecosystem. That's a lot of money. Maybe they did. I don't know, but I'm curious to see what the plans they have for it, versus what Amazon S3 tables, provides, and
Yep.
other advancements. So
Can't just be marketing, right? Like it can't just be marketing,
it's a lot for
which is what
marketing.
it felt like. Yeah. Yeah, but maybe it is, right? They didn't have much. They had what, $1 million of revenue is the estimate that I heard.
Yeah,
Um,
about that.
Yeah.
yeah, that's quite the
There's
premium.
a there's an interesting dynamic that I'm curious to see where this goes from here. For one, I think the idea of pairing S3, like tightly coupling S3 and an Iceberg catalog, is really really smart,
Yep.
because it allows for all kinds of like um, performance and efficiency improvements that you can do. If you know ahead of time that I'm serving the Iceberg use case and I understand the structure of an Iceberg catalog, then I can optimize my like object storage delivery to like increase the performance of Iceberg access patterns. And I don't know what they've done. There's probably more that they're planning to do there, but that seems pretty smart to me. Like clearly you can find some low hanging fruit there to just improve the object delivery infrastructure. This is conjecture, but this is what I suspect they're looking at. Um, but when you compare that to like to pick, if you think about like Snowflake, for example, people will often be running Snowflake within the AWS region. It's running under the hood. It's using S3 object storage as well.
Hmm.
But like, there's a bit of a dichotomy here where Snowflake is using S3 for the storage of its own tables, but it's just using regular old S3. S3 has no particular awareness that it's being used for driving Snowflake tables. And I don't know much about the metadata structure
Yeah.
that Snowflake is using, but I suspect if you looked at it, it's not that dissimilar from Iceberg. However, now you've got this dichotomy of like Snowflake running on regular old S3, and then an S3 tables product that potentially has performance improvements that are only available for Iceberg and offer performance that you just can't get otherwise. So I don't know where this goes, but like that's what's standing out to me is the potential there for AWS to kind of run away with that performance story.
Yeah, and it's interesting that they seem. I haven't heard much about this from the other two major clouds, right? Is it just me? Have I missed something?
Uh,
GCP and Azure do.
if they
Yeah,
have, I don't know. I mean, GCP always has wonderful stuff, but their marketing, I think they could be a bit more vocal about things. So maybe they have it. I don't know. I've told them
probably
this
true.
before. It's fine, but yeah, I think, but it seemed like it was such a big announcement. It felt like it sort of took people by surprise that I would be if the other clouds have something similar already. I hopefully they're more vocal about it because yeah, this was the
Yeah.
talk of the town all week.
Yeah.
Next week there'll be something else to talk about, but this week this is the thing. So
Yeah,
Do
it's
you have
yeah.
any ideas on this, Joe? Like, do you have any inklings on things that it means or anything?
I mean I need to go try it out this weekend. I mean it was in Denver kind of most of the major part of this week, so I'm gonna set aside some time and just dork around with it and just kind of get an opinion. I have a couple of threads though, no pun intended, about this. I think that one thing I've been talking about with people is, does this mean if Iceberg becomes sort of the de facto standard, what call it just open table formats become a de facto standard for storing analytical data. What does this mean for, the big vendors out there, the Snowflakes, Databricks, Amazons, of the world, and the query engines they have, right? Does this basically become a battle of query engines at this point, or going forward? Or does it mean like your storage has to be that much better than what something like S3 tables provides? If so, what does that mean? And then the other part of it is, I think this is relevant to you guys as a connector ecosystem. Um, if Iceberg is becomes sort of a de facto destination, then what's the competitive play for data integrators and ingestion? So those are kind of two things in my
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
I actually think it's good for us. For our business, it's really positive because it lets us be kind of loading this very interoperable format that can work across many different vendors on the query side. So maybe it's a little easier to do all of the N integrations because you just have to integrate with
Right?
Iceberg and
It's
you kind
easy.
of get them all. But then, optimizing that loading pattern is going to be a big deal. Doing that in a cost efficient way, and then the source connectors become even more important. But there's a lot to the destination side, right? Like doing it well, handling schema migrations and all that stuff. It's not just that's easy problem there.
Not just dumping it in there and forgetting about it. Like,
Exactly. And it's so different to do this for, a SaaS API than like a database that's constantly changing its schema and evolving. And the team really cares about making sure that they get that immediately and get every single column and all that.
mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, it really doesn't from our perspective, it doesn't change the story much. It's we'll absolutely support it. It'll be a slightly different configuration for how our Iceberg connector works today. And it's kind of business as usual. I think to your other question around like for other OLAP warehouse vendors, it is a more interesting. I'll call it a shot against across the bow a little bit. One thing I'm not quite understanding yet is AWS has open sourced and released drivers for Spark,
Right.
certainly for Spark, I think for Flink as well. If you're a vendor though that has put a lot of time and effort into implementing like Iceberg merges, for example, doing low level operations over Iceberg tables, I don't know that there's an API for you to use to interact with the
Mm,
S3 tables catalog. Like Amazon has shipped a driver for the open source tools, but I don't. I suspect that people may be locked out a little bit. I'm a little unclear on like what the API
yeah.
story is for S3 tables, the S3 tables catalog. Um, I know that there's a Glue integration, so you can presumably read tables, S3 tables through Glue, and just using regular object storage. But I don't know that you're able to do mutations and writes back to them.
Mm, that is interesting. And I'm curious in the AWS ecosystem too about um, interoperability. I'm sure this is probably in the docs somewhere, but just how if I have a Redshift instance, how can I join an S3 tables? What's that look like? Because I know clients of mine that they've wondered, okay, I'd love to go to Iceberg, but for whatever reason, you know, there's just reasons, right? So I mean, theoretically, this makes it easier to put your data there, but then how do I join the old data I have? I think that's going to be an interesting one. Should theoretically work, but I don't know.
Yeah, that's a data integrations problem.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
it's the space we play in.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. So,
Athena
if you,
probably.
yeah, if you have reports, yeah, I mean, I want to query a bunch of data and join it all together. Let's make it work. IAM is the other one I was thinking of too. Identity access management, which I'm sure you've all used AWS. I'll just say it's not fun. That's my opinion. Maybe some people have great joy in IAM. I think so I'm curious to see how that all works there too. So, because when you're talking about like access controls and governance and stuff, that's gonna be a pretty big deal. So, because right now, if you can access an S3 bucket, you can access an S3 bucket,
Right.
Hmm.
right? I'm
Yeah.
sure they thought
Yeah,
this through, though. I hope. So,
Yeah.
it's
I suspect you're right. If you want to have your permission structure mapped into identity and access management in Amazon, then you're probably going to have to be restricted to like Athena for query. If you're
yeah,
trying to use some external tool for actually doing your Iceberg queries, I don't see how that permission structure maps into that tool, but we'll
yeah.
see.
Like, I
yeah.
won't hook up Excel to my iceberg. I'm just kidding. Because I'm
Why
crazy.
not? That's the best query engine.
That actually would be the best of both worlds for some people, I'm sure. Be you guys should write that just over the weekend. That'd be funny. Is there no Excel integration for Iceberg? So,
You're
Johnny's
making
actually
Johnny
thinking about
upset right
this.
now.
Yeah, he's actually like, I should just do
It's
this
like,
just to mess with you. So,
it would be pretty wonderful. It would probably have some unintended compute consequences when you change a cell or something.
oh my God.
You spend $4,000.
Oh, that'd be hilarious. Okay, I'm kind of getting to the end of the year. What are you guys excited about next year?
Um, that's a good, that's a really good question. We have a lot going on right now. I think one of the biggest things for us is connectors. We're going like a lot more enterprise on the connector side. I don't know if that's
Hmm.
exciting though. That's really scary. It's going to be painful and scary. So, systems like SAP and stuff.
Oh boy.
Um, yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Get ready for that. Um, but I think like general purpose streaming transformations, that's going to be a really fun one too. We're looking at like Python as a language of choice, just because it feels like for data engineers who actually want to do this, it's a pretty straightforward one. We already support a couple of others. Those are kind of some of the big ones.
Yeah.
Um,
I would say for
That's
me,
cool.
this year has been the year of sort of this federated data planes feature, the idea that you can have data planes running all over the place, some of them private, some of them public in different geographic regions, and they're all integrated. So that was a really heavy lift for this year, and I'm really happy to have that in the place where it's at. And the kind of what's coming up in the next year is a lot of like there's some performance work. The performance is good, but we really want it to be, you know, as good as like I think we could 10x from where we are just in
Really?
terms of like the size of data sets that we're able to handle and that kind of thing. So
Dang.
um, there's the there's improvements that, like, as an engineer, I'm kind of itching to be able to get into in the new year.
Johnny has
And
one thing that like is a funny one. So everyone talks about JSON serialization and that being like a really slow process, right? That's why you can't use JSON for data because it's too slow. And Johnny wrote an optimizer that like makes it does gigabit JSON serialization.
yeah, it's
Wow.
we're basically sorry, this is terribly in the weeds, but I'll try and do this
Oh,
very
go
quickly.
for it. I love this stuff.
Like we really like JSON just because the object, like the pairing of JSON as just a really flexible format with JSON schema, which lets you really lock down what the schema of documents are. And our whole system kind of revolves around JSON schema for deeply understanding the schema of data that we're processing, and then sort of the JSON object model. But we don't actually need to use JSON under the hood. So one of the things that we worked out, and we're starting to kind of deploy this in our own services, is that we can use SimJSON, which is an extremely fast JSON parser. We have this like transcoder that basically parses using SimJSON. It's able to do like a gigabyte a second, and then
Wow.
turn that into a representation that is still like the JSON model. It's all the same data, but it just allows us to pass this around in a very optimized, like zero copy, zero deserialization way, where different services, like we're obviously running a distributed system, we can schlep around these representations of these documents that components can basically just very quickly access and traverse without needing to do any parsing. So we've kind of worked out like how we can make this really scale efficiently within our backend while still having it be JSON, which is just a really nice format to work with.
That's super cool. I never heard of SimJSON. I'm just looking at the GitHub for it right now. It's it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's the JSON parsing is slow because implementations are often slow, but there are very, very fast implementations of JSON parsing, and SimJSON is the fastest I'm aware of.
Wow. Super cool.
Yeah.
I have to add that to my list of stuff to work out on too. Jeez.
What
Oh,
about
C
you?
Yeah.
What are you excited about, Joe?
C++. Oh, yay. Um, I'm in the middle of right now of finishing this book. It should be done by now, but I had that course with Coursera that was a ton of time to build. So finally back on the book. And starting a new company actually, starting a new education and media company. So you'll hear more about that soon. My book is coming
Cool.
out on it, and yeah, I got a lot of exciting stuff coming out. But I'm focusing more on education. I feel like that for me is it's a good fit, but it also I think it helps one of the issues I see in the industry right now, which is I think we have a lot of terrific tools. There's no shortage of great tools, but a lot of times I see user error and lack of knowledge and skills of how to use these tools is one of the big impediments. And so, maybe hopefully we can make a dent in that. And I'm excited to see what happens. If not, then I guess we'll just the null hypothesis is we're all lazy and nothing gets done. So we'll find out. But
Yeah.
Awesome.
that's going to be a fun one.
Very
And
noble too.
what's that? Very
Very
noble.
noble too.
Thank you. And what else? Yeah, working on some workshops right now, actually, as well. I have to deliver a bunch of in-person stuff, so I've been revamping those. Maybe I'll check out Flow and see if there's a fit for that in these workshops. But yeah, just gonna
Cool.
be busy. Just kind of, I think, just getting out of consulting is like the big one. I was just excited about. I just got really burned out with that, and just want to do something
Yeah.
different. Like, we got no shortage of inbound coming in, but I'm just like, I just don't want to do this anymore, at least for a while. So,
Yeah, it's nice, like always fun when you like go down a new path, right? For me, that's been the beginnings where you're figuring it out and kind of learning the most.
mhm.
That learning phase is the most fun part. I like startups for that reason, honestly, because usually when
Yeah,
you're growing a startup, you're doing different things and you're changing what you're working on and your brain is at least working. As opposed to most bigger companies when you're working at a job for a long time, it's kind of the same job
it's the
over and
same
over.
job. Yeah, nothing wrong with that. If that's what you want to do, go for it. But I think we all seem like men of adventure, and so and excitement, and why not kill ourselves doing startups? So and have kids and all that kind of stuff. But it's hard, dude. I mean, I've done plenty of startups as well. Some with great exits, some with not. But it's like it's just it's a different beast, and it's hard to describe. I think to people who aren't in it, like you're constantly thinking about your business, and that's because you love it, right? It's like a kid.
Yeah.
If I had to tell people like how many times I just wake up in the middle of the night and can't go back to sleep because I was thinking about some stupid thing from our company, I don't think they would believe me.
Yeah. No, it's a different beast though at the same time, doing it with kids. The startup experience, and fortunately we're a little more mature now and it's not quite as crazy as it was in the very early days. But
Mm.
the experience of I with Dave started a startup in my 30s, in my earlier 30s, and that was a tremendously different experience from this company now with three kids.
How is
It
it
really
different?
just requires a lot of a lot of diligence and focus, I suppose. I've definitely benefited, I think, from experience and just being able to kind of more quickly get to like approximately right answers or approximately good answers to questions. Like time management is just incredibly important. It's there's a lot of tension with like dealing with work fires, but also your family still needs your attention and time. Your kids still want like dad around. So how do you balance those two things? And it often feels like there is no good answer. Like you're going to let someone down a little bit,
Yeah.
and it's like you're prioritizing who you're going to disappoint. um,
Man,
and
yeah.
managing because it can't be the same person every time that you're disappointing, whether it's work or like you know yeah. So the that battle, and when I was in my 30s, it felt like and my wife was like doing a PhD at the time, so she was super busy with that.
Oh, dear.
It felt like there was near infinite time to pour into the startup effort, and that's just not the
Yeah.
case now.
I
Um,
remember one of the stories that your wife tells, which is you were on your honeymoon, I believe, and you did like an ungodly amount of work on your honeymoon.
Oh,
I remember it was something like that she
Johnny.
told me. You were in Paris or something. Was it?
yeah, we've definitely. I don't think the honeymoon. I'm not that bad,
Okay.
but we definitely
Okay.
have. We've had weekend getaways where yeah, I do remember one getaway where we went to northern New York for just like a long weekend, and I think I spent like 7 or 8 hours fighting with Big Table in
Oh,
our like production infrastructure for the company at the time.
yeah, yeah.
So yeah, there are things like that that just no normal W-2 person would deal with. Um, but you kind of have to because there's no one else.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the support infrastructure isn't quite there when you're relatively small.
No, I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday about this because he joined a um, startup, and they just raised their Series A, doing really well. But and he's like, God, I have a lot to do. I have a lot of work, and now he's been thrown into doing the sales, enterprise
Mhm.
sales, different beast. Never done it before. Um, and I was
Hopefully, as a
like,
good teacher.
hey, I had to introduce him to some of my friends who are enterprise sales people. Because I'm like, yeah, you could say, like, what, can I get some advice? I'm like, I sell. I'm not an enterprise salesperson. Right? I've sold to enterprises. I've made deals, but like, you need to talk to somebody who's set up, revenue operations and sales and has a playbook. That's all they do, right? And so I told him, your job right now is you're wearing a lot of hats. You have to start taking hats off and give them to people. You just raise money. Like, take the hat off, hire the best person for that hat, and then keep going.
Yeah.
Because pretty soon you're gonna get a bunch of new hats dumped on you, and now you have to figure out how you're going to hand those off too. And like this, he's like, oh, it'll get better at some point. And I'll get, and I'm like, no, it won't at all, actually, until this whole thing is over. You're just going to continuously be working on different stuff.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, the way I look at it is one of my biggest jobs is to get just good enough at something to like get it through till I can hire someone who's way better at that thing than me.
Yeah,
And if I can do that effectively, then I'm good at my job. But you have to be able to learn anything and do it okay.
it's just like CrossFit, actually. So, like,
All right, you got me.
pretty
I'll
mediocre
be in the
athlete and
next one.
everything, but yeah, it's like yeah, you're never a specialist, but you do have to get the job done, right? And there's other things you got to think about too. And I think this is something people, if you're starting, if you for the audience, if you want to start a business or do a startup, like just know, you're probably a very good technician at what you do, but there's a lot of other stuff you got to think of: sales, marketing, finance, all this other stuff, health
HR.
insurance, HR, yeah, like the fun stuff. And you get to do
Yeah.
it all. It's great.
Takes you a while to learn how to do HR effectively, I'll tell you
Oh my
that.
God. What were some of the things that you had to learn?
Oh, this is a conversation. I mean, well, hiring is a huge topic by itself. Just hiring really well is incredibly hard because it's not the same for every position, right?
Yeah, I'll
It's so
interject that
much different. Yeah.
Dave was talking about like he's about learning, to be good enough to get someone else to hire. And one of the challenges of hiring for like new roles that are being created as the company grows is like you need to learn enough yourself to be able to identify whether someone actually knows what they're talking about in the hiring process.
Mm,
Like,
Yeah.
you have to be
And
good
they're
enough at that
critical.
job to evaluate someone else.
Yeah. And each one of those like is so critical because a misstep on that side is incredibly, incredibly costly. And so just like learning how serious and how much emphasis you have to put into it and how serious you have to take that. And then like who to go to try and help you out with those types of things that know enough to maybe be on an interview panel. That's a really hard one, but that's just like one example out of many on that side.
out of many.
And my own take is like, recruiting firms are great, but no one, it is fundamentally your job to hire people. Like
Yeah.
a headhunter for someone who's going to take a high level role in the company, like that can be helpful, but it's still your job and on you to really like make sure that that's a good fit and evaluate the candidates and do your best to make sure that goes well. So there really is nothing that isn't your responsibility. Um, and if you're hoping to be able to offload stuff, you're at least initially until you can find really good people, you're in for a world of disappointment.
Yeah.
Yeah. That backlog of
But
stuff you
then
got to do gets bigger. What were you saying, Dave?
then when you finally do find that person that like checks all those boxes, it's just immediately like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like my life just changed. And this moment is like life changing for me. I can now have like 20% of my time back and do something else with it.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think it's a paradox, especially when you start a company, you're supposed to be the CEO, so to speak, or CTO, whatever, the leader, focusing on ideally the direction, but you're doing, I think most of the time, everything except that. Like you're trying to, but you got a million other things to do as well. It's hard.
Yeah.
Um,
My
yeah.
own story in that is just trying to like getting people in place where I can hand off big responsibilities to the platform.
Mm,
I like just diminishing my own role as much as possible as an individual contributor,
it's awesome.
which is, yeah, it's still a work in progress.
That's cool. I could do a whole new episode on entrepreneurship. Actually, there's so much to unpack though. Like I saw my friend yesterday. You got to find ways to work on your business, not in it, right? Like I think that's like figure out pro systems, all that kind of stuff that make it run. Kind of like what you're doing with the SDK and so forth, right? It's just that's that's how you get wins. Is just eventually trying to process stuff. Like for this new company, I'm looking at how can I leverage AI as much as possible, right? How could I have even an army of bots running everything? So my whole thing is like just trying to automate everything if I can. Because I don't know, hiring's great. Hiring is expensive. Hiring, if you hire wrong, like you said, it's costly in more ways than just money. Uh,
Yeah.
right. And firing is also expensive, and not fun at all. So
Yeah. Very personally taxing too.
personally taxing. I guess it depends who it is you fired, but yeah, usually it is. Some days you're just like, I got 20% of my life back. It's great. So- but not
Fair
normally,
enough.
right? It does suck for the most part. Yeah. So yeah, the audience, I'm not completely evil. So
It's never fun to fire people. Like even where
no,
that's 100% the right call, it is not fun.
no, it isn't. It's not.
But it is always obvious afterwards that you did the right thing. And that's at least the positive side.
Yeah. And the thing is, you always know that you should have done it sooner.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah,
just not
every
hiring
single time.
every single time. Well, on that cheery note, so uh I'll have you guys back on again. It's fun chatting with you. I don't think we've had the group discussion before with you two. It's always been like one of you's been on or the other, but not both.
Yeah,
So
no, it's fun. Thanks for having us. And sorry for pushing back last
anytime.
time. My
No, it's
dog is
okay.
fine. If you were wondering,
Yeah.
she ended up being okay.
Okay.
So,
Good. Good. That's good. So that's awesome. I guess there are people who want to learn more about what you guys are up to. How can they do that?
I think go to our website, estuary.dev. We have a nice little Slack community now, and
Nice.
um, but our website's really rounding out. You can find a lot about what we do there, so that's probably the best bet to start.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
awesome.
And as Dave mentioned, we're very engaged on Slack. So if you have questions or anything, reach out there. We generally are very active.
You'll literally get me and Johnny talking to
That's
you.
awesome. Do it at 2 in the morning, everybody. So
Yeah.
Dave wakes up with something on
Oh
his
yeah.
mind. He's always up with something on his mind anyway, so he'll just answer your message and not go to bed. Plus, he has a kid, so he's probably up anyway.
I,
So
I thought you said you weren't evil, Joe.
that was a lie. I was just kidding. So well, awesome. You guys have a good one. So
You too.
Thanks.
Thanks,
You too,
Jim.
Jeff.
yeah, of course.